Okay, so that's time again. Yay! Now, if you didn't watch part one, go and watch part one because it will explain some of the things that I'm going to be talking about and how we're going to do this, and you'll get a better feel for what's going to go on. Today, we're going to take a look at Lotus, Split, Sunset, and the overall data as well. You will find out who are the best agents, who are the worst agents. You'll be surprised, maybe. But yeah, let's take a look at it. We'll start with Lotus, and the thing about Lotus that you might not expect is that this is now Ascent Part 2. Because we have a comp that is just completely dominating. A 54% pick rate for the Fnatic comp, the comp that you'll all be familiar with. And that's a lot because Lotus was actually the most played map of any of the maps as well. The next most picked comp is just 5%. So we go from 54% to 5%. And oh, by the way, that comp is just the same comp, but with Sky instead of Fade. The non-mirror win rate, though, of the meta comp, though, is exceptionally good. Right, so this is, again, it's another thing where you'd love to say, like, oh no, don't play that comp, no, you know, do something more interesting, all that kind of stuff, but the comp is good. And then a little interesting one here at the bottom is obviously FPX. Again, just playing something bizarre. Triple controller here with an Astra, no Sentinel, Gecko as well. They have won all 5 games they've played on this map, but yeah, they're crazy. Now, in terms of archetypes, obviously, again, it's going to be a lot of the meta, right? If we include the Sky stuff in there and Cypher for Killjoy, you know, a lot of it is that. Then we do have this double duelist stuff, you know, like Paper Rex type stuff. Some other teams have tried it as well. That's a bit of the meta. And then you've got like this double initiator. Team Liquid kind of play this kind of Breach Sova stuff that maybe will become more popular with the Viper nerfs. You know, maybe when I do this next time, you know, after champs, you know, maybe this will be a bit higher and this meta stuff will go down, but we'll have to see. And then when it comes to the agents as well, you know, obviously in terms of pick rates, we're expecting, you know, that all of the meta comp agents are really high. You know, Omen's really high, Ray's really high here, up in the 90s. But the thing is as well, if we take a look at the win rates, it basically does scream like, play the meta comp, right? Like, don't play Cypher. Killjoy is better than Cypher on this map, right? The Chamber actually is doing pretty well. A lot of that, of course, is T1, who are pretty good on this map. Have got quite a few wins on this map playing the Chamber, you know, but it's still a relatively small sample size here. Don't go for double initiator. Don't play Breach. Play Viper instead. I mean, Viper's win rate on this map 74%. So even with the nerfs, I mean, I would still say play Viper on Lotus, right? Because, I mean, this win rate is so high that, yeah, the nerfs might, you know, knock it down somewhat. You know, it won't be as good, but it's so good already that it's like, there's no way you shouldn't really play Viper, in my opinion. Same thing for the initiators, right? Like, don't play Sky, play Fade. Fade is the better option. Although Gecko did well as well, right? But basically, don't play Sky. Play one of Fade or Gecko. Okay, now let's move on to Split, which has always been somewhat interesting in terms of the meta. The most played comp overall was what I'll call the Sen comp, right? With the Cypher, Viper, Cypher, Solo Ray stuff. And you can see that it's doing pretty well. 33% pick rate. This is what I would call kind of like a healthy level for the most picked comp, right? Not too high necessarily. The next most played comp was a similar idea to last year, of course, with the double duelist, but with an Omen instead of Astra. And it's doing okay. And then finally at the bottom here, I've added the Astra version, so kind of last year's meta on Split. You see, it's not doing so well. And this is something that I was saying all of last year, that, you know, statistically, Omen has always bodied Astra on this map. And you should have just played Omen last year instead of Astra. And now it seems like, you know, teams are kind of agreeing that, you know, it probably is the better direction to go in. Omen is just better than Astra. If we go into the archetypes as well, we do have some different archetypes, which is nice. I've called this one Sen-esque, right? This could be basically what this is solo Sentinel, solo Initiator, solo Duelist, normally a Raze, and then you've got Viper with Omen normally in there as well. That's what these kind of comps are, but the Initiator could be something other than Sky. It could technically be a Chamber or a Killjoy instead of a Cypher as well, but mostly Cypher. Then we've got the double duelist stuff. We saw, you know, quite a few teams try this, sometimes with a Yoru Raze, sometimes with Jet Raze. Then we've got what I'll call double initiator Viper. So this is without the Cypher now. We're maybe playing like Breach Sky, something like that. And then we've got the double initiator Cypher, so without a Viper this time. And when we come to the agents, I mean, this will basically show to you that Split right now is basically play 4 agents plus 1. You know, if we take a look at the pick rates of Omen, Raze, Sky, Viper, they're all pretty high. And, you know, basically it is these 4 for a lot of people, plus then whatever your 5th choice is. But if you take a look at the win rates, again, there are some trends, themes here that we can talk about. Omen is bodying Astra, as is always the case, right? I could go back to the year prior, I could go back to the year before that. And it would be the same story. It has always been the same story. Anytime I've done these sets, Omen always beats Astra. In terms of other things though, one interesting note I did find was that Skye isn't doing so well. Now, here's the thing, as we saw on the first slide of Split, you know, the kind of Sen comp playing solo Skye is doing well. So what's going on here? Well, this is probably maybe more to do with when Skye is paired with another initiator, right? Maybe those comps Skye is not working as well in, you know, and maybe there are better options available like the Fade. It does make me wonder though, you know, because I'm not even sure if anyone has actually tried this comp, of whether you would try the Sentinels comp, but with a Fade instead of a Skye. Right, and so you end up with kind of a bit of a Lotus-esque comp, right, where you're playing Omen, Raze, Fade, Viper, just with a Cypher instead of a Killjoy here probably on Split. That comp, I would be interested to see how that would do. You know, maybe that is a better choice than Skye. I don't know, but maybe it's worth a try. And then our final map is Sunset. Now, obviously, Sunset is the new map, so, you know, there was a lot of different comps here. I think Sunset probably had the most varied comps, as you might expect, for a new map. But we have kind of cemented our place now as this kind of stuff, right? Omen, Raze. Here we've got Breach Sova is our most played with a Cypher, but this kind of Omen, Raze, Cypher plus 2 initiators is a lot of what Sunset has now become. You see actually the most played one here, which was played a lot in like China and quite a bit in Pacific too, actually isn't doing too well overall, and that the Gecko KO version is doing better than kind of, you know, this Breach Sova idea. But you see that the pick rates are just like 14%, 13%. There is no kind of there isn't a dominant idea yet on Sunset necessarily in terms of just one comp. One comp I did want to show down here is kind of the Sentinels comp from Split, but just applied to Sunset, because this has not been a popular comp for a lot of teams. I think Cloud9 are one team that are playing it, but you see it's doing pretty well. In terms of the archetypes overall, you can see that, yeah, we are being dominated, and this will go up, I think, as we're going forward, and the Sunset meta is kind of becoming more developed in this kind of double initiator, Cypher, Raze, Omen stuff. Just which initiators to play necessarily is the choice. Then we've got these kind of Split-esque comps, so this will be with the Viper and the Cypher as well. Then you've got some Sage stuff. Obviously, Paper X, you know, kind of introduced Sage to this map, and then a couple other teams have followed suit. And then you've got kind of a bit of a rare idea. I think Vitality are one of these teams that play this kind of stuff. No Sentinel, but with a Viper. So you're getting rid of that Cypher. You're playing double Initiator and a Viper with a Raze and an Omen. In terms of the pick rates here, again, it is basically Omen, quite a bit of Raze, quite a bit of Cypher, and then the initiators, you know, some Viper, some Sova, some KO, some Gecko, some Breach, right? Some disagreement there as to what initiators to play here on Sunset. But if we take a look at the win rates would suggest like play Gecko, play KO, right? That's kind of where you want to be. The Breach, the Sovas of the world, the Fades of the world, not doing as well, right? The Geckos, the KOs, those are the ones that seem to be, you know, doing pretty well over the course of the entire season. But if you want to hop into this Viper idea, that's doing pretty well as well. And obviously Sage is a small sample size, but, you know, obviously Paper Rex are kind of maybe carrying this a little bit, right? Of like, hey, Sage looks good, but probably that's just Paper Rex, really. Okay, so those are the maps. But now let's take a look at the overall stuff. So here, what we're going to do is we're going to rank all the agents in terms of their pick rates. So this is out of 1,230 comps. I have color coordinated the agents by their role. And you have the total number of the games in the brackets just there, and their pick rates going, you know, from kind of down from the left column going across. So obviously no real shock here. Viper, Omen, Raze. Next up, though, is Cypher, and I did think that was pretty interesting. I was a bit surprised, honestly, that Cypher and Sova were the next two most played agents. Now, obviously, some of the map pool is helping, right? Like Sunset being a Cypher map, of course, is helping Cypher just there. So, and then you've got kind of some familiar names, right? Like Jet, Killjoy, KO. Yeah, that seems about right. Obviously, Skye's had a big fall off. You know, Skye was kind of up here with this top 3 last year, but the nerf, obviously. Nice, 25% is still, you know, a healthy place, honestly, for Skye. Gecko is then at 24, and then we start to fall off a bit to, you know, some of the other initiators. You know, the initiator class is in a pretty decent spot, right? Sova is almost at 38, but everyone is at least 14, right? Like, we're in a good spot for initiators. The others not so much. Then going down, I mean, then we've got Brim, Yoru at 12%. I mean, did you ever think you'd see the day? Harbor, Astra. I mean, Astra, I was so shocked was this low, to be honest, but maybe this is a bit of a sign. Please buff Astra. Please buff Astra. And then further on down, you know, you've got your regulars down here, your Sage, Chamber, Neon, Phoenix, Reyna, Deadlock, Clove, and of course ISO, who did not get played in a single game. Even Clove got played in some games despite barely being available for most of this. Come on, ISO, what are you doing? Okay, that was the pick rate, but now let's talk about the win rates. Now, there are some caveats here that we need to talk about. First of all, if anyone had under 50 non-mirror games, I've kind of graded them out. I just want to start with Brim, actually, because Brim is up there. Brim's actually 5th overall on 54%. What I want to explain about Brim is that Brim is a good example of an agent that will always be high on this list because Brim only gets played on maps that people know Brim is good on. Right? Bind, Fracture, like that's only where you will see Brim. You won't see Brim really anywhere else, and so he doesn't have the losses, you know, when a team maybe is experimenting with something kind of a bit weird on a map. You know, they aren't playing Brim, but they might be playing, you know, Sova. You know, they might try a Sova, or they might try a Yoru, or they might try, you know, something like that, right? Where it's a bit experimental on a map. But Brim doesn't have that, so Brim doesn't suffer from that. So just keep that in mind with some of these numbers that, you know, sometimes with some of these agents, it's because, you know, they're either just locked in and everyone knows where they're good and they just play them there, or an agent can suffer because teams are trying to experiment with them and it's just not working. But as we take a look at the list, Clover's at the top, but he's only played 3 games, so don't worry about it. Viper is really at the top, so yeah, when people say, oh, Viper didn't deserve this big of a nerf, whatever, Viper did deserve that big of a nerf, and maybe even more. Sage was 1 game off, you know, the 50 games to not be grayed out, and it's doing pretty well. One of those agents where, you know, isn't get experimented with a ton, right? It's mostly Icebox and a bit of Sunset. Omen, we also have an Omen problem. Like, there's just no other way of putting it. Like, I know people don't like when agents keep getting nerfed and whatever, and they want to see more buffs, and sure, more buffs would be great, but Omen needs a nerf. Then we have, you know, like Gecko doing pretty well. Again, a lot of that is like Sunset type stuff, you know, where Gecko's kind of dominating. Same situation for Fade, really, where a lot of those wins are coming from Lotus games, pretty much. Then once we start getting into these 50, 51, 52, 49 kind of range, like, I wouldn't worry about it too much because you're only a couple games off. Like, you're fine, right? Whatever. As we start to come down towards the bottom of the list, though, let's talk about Skye for a brief second. So Skye, you know, obviously the Skye nerf was a pretty significant nerf, and I do think, you know, has obviously had a big impact on Skye's overall, you know, potential on a lot of maps. And Breach is down there again. And look, Breach is always down there. I don't know what else to say at this point, but every single time I do this, Breach is pretty much at the bottom of every single list. Right, at least of agents that have a decent sample size, Breach is always down there. Doesn't matter the map pool. You know, when I did this first with Haven and Fracture in the map pool, for those of you screaming like, oh, but Breach, if he had his best maps, he'd be good. No, he was still bottom, even when Haven and Fracture were in. In fact, it's even worse when those maps are in. Part of me really does think that, like, it's because of Viper, right? Because often you will get Viper versus Breach, right? Either we're playing double initiator with a Breach, or we're playing solo initiator and we're playing double control with the Viper instead. And Viper is just so much better than Breach that when you play Breach against a Viper, you just always lose, right? Like, it's funny that literally it is 60-40, right? These numbers are literally Viper is on 60 and Breach is on 40. Maybe there's something in that. And then at the bottom, we've got Phoenix, Deadlock, and ISO. Phoenix not doing so hot. I mean, you know, 31 games isn't massive, but it's not nothing either, right? Yeah, and that's it. Those are the stats. Feel free to pause, go back, take a look at this if you want, and see what's going on. And if your main is doing well, then good for you. And if not, then it doesn't matter because ranked is nothing like pro play, and it really doesn't matter.